movie was that? I'm dying to watch that movie now, just to know the behind the scenes.
Okay, right. So one of my point is that it's luck as much as anything that you actually mesh with somebody. So I think it's like, I don't know, internet dating. I've been married for 35 years, what would I know? But I know that you have an instant visceral reaction to somebody or not, and ours was a disaster, as you can see.
So did you think about your characters', backstory? Did you think about how they hung out outside of the movie, to create the rapport? Sometimes people do that when they're performing. Or were you just this way from the beginning?
Kind of this way from the beginning. Well, also we meet within the movie, so there's no need for a backstory there. And
yeah.
I think, we would talk about things, but I think there was just an easy flow, and the whole set was so, Murray runs a really lovely set that you do feel like she's definitely in control in the best sense of it, that she's watching out for everything so you don't have to. And if anything comes up or there needs to be a change or something new is developing, she's really easy to go with it. And we shot this film in 28 days, which is insane. And I think we've talked about—
In a Brooklyn winter.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It sounds crazy, yet I never felt rushed. Did you? Yeah.
No.
Which is really a testament to her, and just knowing what she wanted to shoot on the day, and really knowing that the script we had to shoot, we didn't need to change things on the day. So it was lovely.
And the other thing that I was so struck by is that a lot of the crew were women. It was produced mostly by women, apart from David Yarnell, who knew Lee Israel and tried to get her to write this story for years. Directed by a woman. The leading actor is a woman.
You said that with a bit of a question.
Yeah.
Here.
So, I just come off Logan, which was 300 crew members of fucking steel blades and testosterized. I felt like a sort of will-o'-the-wisp dandelion amongst all of that. So to actually come onto this and feel that all my female hormones were in the right place, it was such a relief. You know what I mean? It was an amazing experience.
Well, let's watch a clip so you guys get a taste of it. So, Melissa, you said earlier that Lee, was not necessarily a likable person. Even in her obituary, one of her friends said that she was hard to work with. And we see that on screen. She's not necessarily a likable character, which is not something that we usually see from leading women characters, least of all your character. Was that part of what appealed about her?
For sure. But also within just reading the script, somewhere about a quarter of the way in, I realized I was so enamored with her because she didn't care what people thought of her. To her own detriment and sometimes to her benefit, she just was like, this is what it is. I don't care. I don't want you to like me. I don't need you to like me. She just wanted to write and be allowed to do what she could do best. And I think, it's reflecting the world we are. Everyone is, the most interesting people in the world are flawed and eccentric, and I think we're drawn and repelled by people for all of their highs and lows. So to get a character like Lee that really never plays the middle. There's no gray area to Lee. There's very little light and a lot of dark, but when she is light, it counts for more to me, because she's near and dear to my heart now. But I don't know, it's just, I found her really riveting, and it's so much more interesting to me to play someone like that, because you really have to balance, even as aggressive or prickly as she could be on the outside, I was always quite aware of why and what defense mechanisms were going on to make someone put up that kind of armor.
And she was enamored of her work. I mean, she had that relationship
For sure.
with
She was very proud of her work, never
the people
questioned it.
that she wrote about, and she had ambition as a writer, which is also something that you don't see. Now, Richard, you have famously played some villains, like in Logan. Actors always talk about how fun it is to play the bad guys. But why? I mean, don't you have to like your character a little bit? Sell me on it.
I'm a very nice person in this story. Yeah, I'm not a bad guy.
Yeah.
No, I think that in terms of villainy, in a situation of political correctness, you can't. It's much easier as the former colonial rulers of your country 100 years ago, just to make English people the bad guys, because we don't mind, and we're also very cheap, and we don't have accents that you think, what are they speaking, Kazakhstanian or whatever? So I think now you can do Russian villains again because of what's going on. But for the last gravy years of my career that's gone, being a villain is, cheap and understandable. I think that's the reason. Seriously.
Oh my God. So it wasn't that you loved playing villains, you just had the right accent? Is that what you're saying?
I also think that it helps that my drama professor gave me this assessment when I finished my training. He said, I think you're going to be a director because you're never going to make an actor. You look too weird. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you've got a sort of resting bitch face tombstone, like nothing happens. And I know, I've caught myself walking past, in a street, seeing in a shop window going, Jesus, who the fuck is that? And you go, oh, unless I smile, I look miserable. And people would come and said, are you all right? And I said, yeah, I'm really happy. So I think it lends itself more to villainy and psychopathy than not. But thank you for bringing that up.
What did you hear from your theater professors that you thought, uh-oh?
Well, I remember my first teacher here in New York, at some point, someone said that I was, at the time, trying to do stand-up, which I did for an incredibly short period of time. And he just went, oh, I don't see you being funny. Because we only did dramatic, I did only dramatic plays with him. And so I kind of...
Does he know that you earned $43 million last year? I'm serious.
He's a wonderful man.
Who's just choked on his soup.
But from the point of view of this movie, I mean, it is a sort of drama, but there are funny parts in it that, as we saw, and
I think that's Lee's wit. That's so from who she is and from Jack's character. It's just, it's not trying for a joke or even trying to hit a certain thing. It just simply is innately in who she is and what her thoughts and her writing was. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. I was surprised when I first saw it with an audience that people did laugh. At first I thought, I don't think it's supposed to be happening. I didn't know how to take it, but I thought, that's how I see Lee. I mean, she made me laugh. Every time someone told me a story about her, it was some kind of grumbling, mumbling story, and then there was always a punch at the end where I'm like, Anne Carey, who produced one of the producers of the film, said she knew Lee for about 10 years. And would always, when she was trying to take it from the book to a picture, she would always meet her for dinner and they'd talk about it. And she said Lee would always be there early, always early. And then right when dinner was over, Lee would stand up and out, she would go. And then Anne would get the check. And she realized Lee would get there early to always have 2 drinks before Anne was there and put them on her bill, and then away she'd go. And I was like, so it's like all those little stories I got, I was like, she's funny, even if she didn't care if she didn't need the approval of someone thinking she's funny. She just did funny things, which I really admire.
Also, that's not a bad tip.
It's a great scam. Believe me, I'm going to start getting early to places and then leaving, being like, dinner's done, and I'm just going to run out the door.
Is this the first time you played a real person?
It is. I did, something on SNL where it was a real person, or marginally. The jury's still out if there's a heartbeat in that one, so But yeah, and it came with a different weight. It definitely came with a little more pressure. I wanted to do right by Lee and make sure that I was doing what she would have wanted, even though I don't know if she would have liked. I always thought, like, would she really dislike me? I'm pretty chatty. She would probably not like me, but I think she'd like the light kind of on her work.
And Richard, have you had the experience of playing real people that you maybe then interacted with? Because that was not the case here, but.
I played somebody who's dead, Anais Nin's husband, who famously had a 12-inch penis. So she went off with Henry Miller instead. And I thought, well, what a waste. And he was dead, so I couldn't, but I did examine the photograph of his pants intently, thinking, how's he done this? Because it was hidden.
Oh my God.
So I always lower the tone, I'm sorry.
That is really.
You did ask me that question.
I mean,
so I have to be
you can't
truthful.
always turn it back on me. You're the one telling these stories. But that is. I admire that level of research. Your character. One of the other things I love about this movie is that, as you said, it's a portrait of these two people who were an unlikely friendship. They were kind of both loners, and they found each other in an unusual way because they also came from very disparate backgrounds. He obviously was not a literary-minded fellow. And it also is a portrait of New York that may, them existing in a New York that they may not have been able to do today because you couldn't exist, kind of on your wiles alone. Talk a little bit about getting into that period. And, it's only the early 90s, but it still feels like a million years ago.
It does feel like a million years ago. I mean, I moved here in 1990. I was 20, and I was here from 90 to 97. So it was quite a sentimental journey for me because even though New York wasn't as shiny and pretty and what it is now, which is great, but somehow it was more romantic to me there because you could still live here as a struggling artist. And all my friends, we all wanted and had a passion for different things. And yeah, we lived 3 in a studio, but we were still in Manhattan. And I still thought it was exciting, and you could kind of get by in a different way. If you worked hard enough for it, you could still swing it, and you had to be creative. And being able to film in all these real locations, and to find, Mari did such an incredible job of finding these tiny little slices. And when you would go to them, and you can see in the film, it is like, oh, it hasn't changed. I mean, and it was really hard to do, and I know that was quite an undertaking. And to find these beautiful bookstores, of which there are not very many left. And she said even during scouting, there were bookstores closing. From week to week, they would go back and say, we're not going to be here in 3 weeks. We're closing. You can't shoot here. And so many of those bookstores were the real bookstores where Lee sold her letters. And I think some of them were quite hesitant because they didn't want to be thought, made a fool of, that they were conned. And Mari really, let them know this is not a story about you being duped or you not being good at your job. It's a story about how talented this woman was and kind of what she was pushed to do because of circumstances. So I don't know, as an actress, to be in these real locations and to be jetted back into New York that I knew so well, I just thought it added, it's a whole other main character in the film.
Yeah, and Richard, your character especially kind of survives on his wits.
Yeah.
In a way that, again, really, you can find it now, but it's rarer.
Yeah, he was also HIV positive and died in 1994. And I remember so distinctly coming to visit Sandra Bernhard, and we just play husband and wife in a film with Bruce Willis called Hot and Hot. And it was 1991, and she was living in the meat packing district, and I'd never seen this before, of young men emaciated with AIDS on street corners holding placards saying, abandoned by my family, abandoned by God, no Medicare. And it made such an impression of just thinking, how can you live in a city that has this amount of wealth and that can be on the street corner? So that, when I have this line that I think you saw where it says, Melissa's character says, why don't you help me out with this scam that I'm doing? but you can't tell anybody. And he said, well, I can't tell anybody, all my friends are dead. And he's flippant about it. But they had all died. And in doing the research about trying to find pictures of Jack or anybody that knew him, there was nobody alive that is around, because all his friends did die. But as Melissa says at the end of the film, you had a great time because you basically fucked your way through Manhattan or slept your way through Manhattan.
Should we watch another clip? So to talk a little bit more about the balance of comedy and drama in the film, Melissa, we know that you and Richard, we are gathering, I think all of us today, that you are both quick on your feet. And you often work where you do some improv. Is this a film where you were really religiously adhering to the script, or were you playing around a little bit?
Every once in a while I would add a little something, just if something Richard did seem to warrant it. For the most part, the script was so beautifully done, and I think Lee played more in what wasn't said. So I tried to not have her communicate so much always through talking, if that makes any sense.
I had 2 improvised words that are in the film. The first time I come to the Julius Bar and I meet Melissa's character, I say, Jack Hock, big cock. And they kept it in. I'm getting typecast, I realize now.
Truly typecast.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme emerging. Well, to talk about the authenticity, like from the pictures I've seen of Lee, I actually think that she was a little bit more stylish, at least at the end of her life, than the way she was portrayed on screen. But I know that you are a fan of a bad wig.
Well, you say bad, I say wonderful.
Yeah.
I go back to, I'm a real people watcher, and I wanted her, the pictures that I saw were her on the backs of her covers, and I thought these were at photo shoots. These were in her better days. So I thought about, when she wasn't dyeing her hair, when she wasn't putting on a new blouse for a photo shoot, because the day-to-day, especially during this period, I had a strange thing of she dresses like an Italian. She should have a very small closet, but it should be beautiful items. It should be tailored pants, jackets, cashmere sweaters. But at this point in Lee's life, they're 15 years old, maybe a little longer. They've been worn quite a bit because she doesn't have a huge closet. They don't even necessarily fit that well. It's been 15 years, like things change. So I really wanted to show her I thought if her most glamorous was the book on the jacket, and the very few pictures that are out there, I kind of wanted to take her back to her more utilitarian, pure function.
But why do you love a bad wig? I guess is my question.
Oh, I can talk about wigs all night. They're the most transformative thing for me. At least for me, it's what really, if it's, if you can't tell it's a wig, and if it just changes the shape of your face, texture, and, I have very, it's like Marsha Brady kind of straight hair for the most part, and putting on something else and letting the gray grow out and change it, it just, to me, changes. Maybe it's just in my head, but I think you put a wig on and it really does transport, at least it transports me in how I feel. And sometimes it's so weird that I can't even run, like until I know what the wig is on the character, if I'm wearing a wig in it, I almost can't do the lines even in like a rehearsal until which now that I'm saying it sounds super crazy and I'm aware of it. That's like the weirdest thing I've ever said. Wow. But it just does. It's how I plug into it. It's all the exterior things. They don't make how I feel inside about a character, but once the puzzle pieces click together and the inside matches the outside, then I'm like, okay. Then I feel like I've earned the right to do that character.
Richard, is hair as transformative for you?
No, because I don't have very much left. So no, I don't get ever offered the opportunity to wear wigs.
Is there anything else that is the thing that helps you click in to a character that way?
I have no idea. No, I knew in the situation of this film, I'd read in Lee's book that Jack Hock had a small sort of stubby cigarette holder that he thought would stop him getting lung cancer because he was a chain smoker. And I thought, as somebody who gallivanted around Greenwich Village at that time with a cigarette holder was an affectation and an image that he had himself of a certain looseness. So that's all I had to go on. And I asked the costume designer if I was allowed to have that, and they said yes. So that was it. I mean, you can see how deep and superficial I am. I was given great clothes. Arjun, the costume designer, he gave all my clothes were like the sort of Spandau ballet neo-romantic look of the early 80s, but worn on past his sell-by date last gasp at the singles bar, Old Fart, in the early 90s. So everything was sort of really on its last legs. And that helped as well.
I mean, they were both in a threadbare sort of moment in their lives.
Yeah.
And Lee at one point was on welfare.
Yeah.
And you know, this turned her life around in many ways.
And I was between apartments.
Right.
So, you know.
I'm curious, when you guys started out wanting to be actors, what kind of stories did you want to tell? Did you want to, you know, do Shakespeare or biopics, or, you know, be known for pooping in a sink from Bridesmaids?
That's a feather in your cap. You don't expect to want that one. I'm reminded of it all the time. I've also been asked if I really did. And I said...
And did you?
It's like, no, it wasn't real. It wasn't real. I think I wanted to do everything. I didn't know at the time, and I think I still don't believe that you have to pick, pick a genre. I don't think if you do comedy, you can't do drama, you can't do this. I just always think I want to tell stories. I think, especially from all through acting school and every play, I guess something my acting teacher did tell me is he was always like, I need you to bring in something for someone younger than 70. And I was 20, but I was like, I brought in, one of my first plays I brought in to work on was Trip to Bountiful. But mine, as the Geraldine Page part, and I was like, but I really connect to her. And he's like, she's an old woman at the end of her life. He's like, can you play one of the other characters? And I was like, no, and then I'd bring in another one. So I think it was the thought of playing someone the furthest from myself, regardless of who or what, just different, seemed to, I don't know, maybe it's I'm from a small farm in Illinois, and I didn't see much of the world or have many experiences until I was 20 in New York, that I just have a real fascination for people, that I think I get to walk around in people's shoes for 6-7 weeks at a time, and I'm still bewildered by that.
Richard, what about you? I mean, people with your background often have Shakespearean training, a lot of stage work.
Yeah, that all counts, and that is all part and parcel of what you want to do. But since I was 12 years old, the first play that I was in, my mother said to me when I was 15, why do you always get cast to play snobby, snooty people? And I said, because of this. You look like you've just smelt cat shit and everybody's lower than you. So that sort of marks you. So it's a biological result that I've had, so I blame my ancestors for that, much as I would like to play all these other parts.
Is it important to you now that you've had, that you can sort of pick and choose among roles, that your characters are capable, that they're good people, not necessarily in this case, but that they are people that, you know, an audience member might look up to, that they tell a broader message. Do you feel like you have any responsibility as an artist at this point in your careers?
I think when the character should be, yes. I think I'm always very, you know, careful not to play the woman's the bummer and the guy's the fun one, unless she's a bummer. If she's a bummer because the character is a 3D version of a woman who is a real stone cold bummer, I'm in. If it's just the kind of generic, you know, John, like Paul, like I can't tell you how many scripts I read where I'm like, why do I keep repeating his name? Like, why am I always just weirdly saying and then I would always try to say it differently, like Paul. And they were like, no, you've had it with him. I'd be like, Paul? I was just trying to buck that thing of like, give me any personality, even whatever it is, but like, don't let me just like, you know, drag behind the family critiquing someone. But I don't know if that's answering your question at all. I just went into weird line delivery of Paul, but I do think I have some responsibility. But I also I'm not afraid of a very dark, unlikable character because I think they exist. I just want it to be with intention and purpose.
Do you have to like those characters, something about them, or can you connect to them even if they're totally?
I do like them for that. Even if it's maybe not what's on the page, but I go into a thing of why I think they've become that. I haven't played a murderer or somebody like that, but I would imagine you still connect to why their behavior, why their choices have become so bad. I think there's got to be a little bit of empathy and love for your character, no matter how terrible the person is, I would think.
I'm a total whore. I've been in Spice World, the movie, so I can't really expect anybody to take me seriously on any level, so I'll just shut up. It's true.
I mean, it's been a minute since I've seen Spice World, the movie, but it probably had a message.
It did.
Spice up the world was the message, guys.
It empowered my 8-year-old
still applies.
daughter. It did, thank you. I'm so glad I'm in a socially motivated movie. I'm going to tell her. Thank you.
One of the other things that, you know, is really notable about this movie is, Melissa, you probably cry more than you have in your collected screen moments. Was that something that you have had a lot of training? Is it something that was, what did you do to get you to that place?
I think I just connected to the writing, and, you know, for Lee it was her cat, but I mean, the broader picture was it was the sole thing that she could love and that she received love from. And it's always terrible. I usually don't talk about, it's like what you kind of have to do in those minutes. You kind of transpose what that means to you. And I think thinking about if those most important things were gone, then that, when the writing is that good, I think that becomes, easier to do. You kind of put yourself and other people through terrible things to get to that part.
I always wonder why actors want to do that. Play these tough roles, put themselves through that. Sometimes these things, you carry them with you. It's not easy. It's emotionally can be very taxing to do this.
It is. I mean, it's nuts if you really stop to think about it. I guess it's I can only speak for myself. Sometimes, you feel in service to the character and you've signed on to do it. You believe in the story. Now you have to do it. You can't suddenly go, you know what, this is like uncomfortable and I don't want to do this part. It's like, it's part of it, you have to. So kind of suck it up and do it.
I believed it in the moment with the cats, and I felt very sad. I felt like I've seen that character, that person walking around in the Upper West Side apartment with the sadness for the cat. I will not tell you guys more about that sad moment, but I do want to show you one more clip if we have a time. I love this moment because the audience is so far ahead of what is going to happen, and she's, not quite there with the audience, but she's trying to still keep ahead of this guy who also knows. And in real life, she was caught by the FBI and was sentenced to house arrest.
House arrest, yeah.
And I'm just going to ask, and I'm going to start with Richard, even though I'm a little scared to do this. I'm curious if you have had any inklings of criminal activity in your past.
Everything I'm wearing is stolen. No, I never have, because I've lived in such, no, I haven't.
Not even the thought to shoplift? Nothing?
Oh yeah, that's daily. And I always think if I'm in a restaurant, I order truffles and lobsters and all those things, I'd love just to walk out and never come back. But no, I haven't, because again, this is identifiably long. So no, I haven't. Have you?
Had the inkling?
Have you ever done it?
Had an inkling?
Have you done it?
Have you? Have you?
I mean, people go through periods, The better question is, have you been caught? Anyway, that question was also for Melissa. I think people do go, especially, I feel like teenage girls.
I didn't have a lot to do. I grew up on a farm, so I had to entertain myself. I did steal a chunky when I was like in 4th grade. It was like a big block of chocolate, thusly called chunky, in a silver foil wrapper, and I took it from the dime store, and my dad found me eating it in an aisle, and I told him I found it in my pocket, and he was like, oh, okay. And then on the way home, he bizarrely mentions it to my mom, and the second she did that, I was like, oh God. Because my mom just like turned, and she knew I did not have a chunky in my pocket. And I just remember my mom saying, oh, she did, and how did she buy that? With her paycheck? And then I had to go back to the store and like slide the dime, because I'm 100, it was probably a dime or a quarter across the counter. And the kid in there was like, because I was crying hysterically, going like, I stole chunky! And I had a big blue fluffy coat, which probably did not help the situation. I looked like a crying blueberry. And my mom the kid was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. And my mom pounding on the glass going, it's not okay. Don't tell her it's okay. It's not okay. And he was as freaked out by her as me. And so that was it. And no one is more surprised that I don't have a mugshot than myself. There was a couple years there where I'm like, it's gonna go wrong.
I don't even know what that means.
just into mischief, but it never took a turn. Instead, I just got into like black capes and weird hair, and it all channeled.
You had a goth period?
Oh yeah, like a very, very intense. It was
On
like
the farm?
It was like Susie, Sue, and Robert Smith had a baby, and it was me in like really strange clothes that I thought were just the most fun thing. But I was still too chatty. I was a terrible goth. I looked super menacing, and as long as I could shut my mouth, which didn't last long, we'd go into like juice bars and we'd all pretend to be like I'm even more bored than you are. And like we'd try to do that for a while, and then inevitably I would start talking to somebody. I was like, hi, where are you from? We came from Plainfield. It's a little farm town. And then immediately all my friends were like, just stop talking to people and seem like gloomier. So visually I passed as a goth, but I could never get the like emotional part. I was always like, which doesn't really work when you're supposed to be like emotionally, ripped apart by something. So.
Would you guys watch that movie? I would 100% watch that movie.
The Happy Goth?
It's a YA novel waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Oh,
the wigs I could get for it.
Richard is tearing up, so I'm gonna turn it over to you guys, and we'll get the mics out, and we'll have some audience Q&A. But in the meantime, Richard, I know that one of the projects that you have coming up is a Star Wars movie. Is that right?
It's true. And I'd like to discuss my part and the plot. And I loved it.
Have you shot it yet?
I'm still shooting it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shooting it right now.
Yeah.
You guys are all back. So we have the mics. If anybody wants to come and ask a question, we are welcoming to you. Okay, here we have a brave soul over here. And go ahead.
I just wanted to tell Melissa that we have St. Francis Academy in Joliet, Illinois, in the house.
Oh,
Although I
there you
graduated
go.
before you were born. But you are, I am sure, our most successful alum. What were you like in high school? What was high school, like for you? And did you already know at that point in time that you wanted to get into acting?
I didn't know. I thought I wanted to just do fashion. I loved that. My grandmother was a seamstress, and I think I get that from her. And, I think it was pretty typical at St. Francis. I was kind of cheerleader, tennis. And then junior year, I just started going to goth clubs downtown Chicago. And it took a real sharp turn. But so that was, it was like 2 years where it's like, the added beads and like a tennis racket. And then the last 2 were just pictures of like a weird fur cape and combat boots. But I had fun there. I really loved an all-girls school. What's that? I did one play, and I remember, I can't remember which play it was, but I was a cheerleader in the play. And I was a cheerleader, and I just thought, I don't get it. Like, I'm doing this thing that I am. If I probably would have had a wig, and if they would have let me be, I think if I could have been like the 98-year-old battle axe with a wig, I may have caught on earlier of like, oh, I like this. This is weird.
What did you think you were going to do? You thought you would do fashion design?
I think I wanted to make, women's clothing. And for a while, I wanted to do dysfunctional art and fashion, which somebody kept saying, that's not a thing. And I'm like, well, if you make brick pants, you can't wear them. And I think I told like my guidance counselor that, and I thought it was like a brilliant statement. He's like, get out.
Richard, did you know early on that you wanted to perform?
Yeah.
At 12, you did a play, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And my father did say to me that a life of an actor, and he had no experience of this at all, was that essentially it would be having to wear makeup, wear tights, and avoid buggery. All of which is true. So he was very worried about that, but I've survived. And I'm wearing my tights. A lot of makeup.
Okay, we have a question over here.
Hi, this is for it's loud. This is for Melissa. What's the one most trailblazing thing that you've done that you're most proud of?
Oh, geez. Wouldn't know how to answer that. I think navigating each day with my 2 girls is, I hope I'm trailblazing, at least in the sense of chopping some things down to make the path for them a little better, but.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? You guys, you don't have to be shy. We'll keep talking. If you can make it to the mics, that would be ideal. In the meantime, you ready to have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So it actually came up a little bit about the audience being in the room with you when you're watching a movie. I imagine that doesn't happen a ton, but it probably is even more rare for you to be facing them while it's happening. Is that something that you like doing? Is it better to just sort of do the movie and then go do something else?
I missed what the question was. When the audience.
To be in the room with the audience when you're sort of watching clips or watching a premiere or something and hearing the reactions, and are you sort of like, yes, it hit?
Are you? Who's that for?
It's
Us?
for you.
Oh, me. I think I'm always still watching it like, oh, I remember that. Or like if someone else is in it, like I love watching the other, I usually fixate on the other person. I think I've watched enough that it doesn't bother me. I don't know if I naturally fully associate that it's me. I usually watch the other person and think, oh, look what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I watch it like the audience too.
That's great.
Thank you.
Hi. I actually don't have a question. I just wanted wanted to thank you, Melissa. My son has a very rare kidney disease that he's had since he's 2, and he's 15 now. And you're a mom, and I'm a mom, and I'm sure that your kids have gotten colds or whatever you're going through, and it's always very hard for me to keep him laughing in the hospital or at home or whatever. And he loves you, and he plays your movies over and over and over again. And he's like, can we watch a movie again? Can we watch, anything that you're in, he thinks is hilarious. And he was very jealous that I was coming here today, because I said, guess who I'm gonna see? But I just wanted to thank you, and you make all these great movies, and you should know that you're really changing people's lives and making them happy when you're not. So thank you.
And tell him I said hello.
I will. Thank
What's
you
his
so
name?
much. Matthew.
What is his name?
Matthew.
You tell Matthew I said
I will.
hello.
Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
So that's a good point. I mean, people discount how hard it is to do comedy. And I think, anybody who's done it knows that it is hard. It doesn't have the reputation, perhaps, in the broader industry as being as revered as it should be as an art form. And I think we are all seeing tonight how incredible it can be when people can make you laugh when you least expect it with a very personal story.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to do. I think it's so much more subjective to do comedy. I find it harder. I enjoy it just as much, but in a room full of 100 people, 20 will love it, 20 will hate it, 10 won't get it, 10 take it the wrong way and are offended by something you never meant to offend them about. It's just simply a trickier thing to get everyone on board when all you're really trying to do is give them, an hour and a half or so to just forget their troubles and laugh. It's with the best of intentions, but it's harder to hit the strike.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to go for the tear in many ways than to land the punchline.
There's a lady with a question.
Yes. Thank you, Richard.
Sorry. I knew that you couldn't Linda Blair your head and see.
Sorry. It's sort of a two-part question for both of you. Number one, had you ever given up a role or not taken a role that you're later sorry that you did not take? And also, is there something that you would like to do in the future? Is there a specific role that you would like?
It feels very, it's you get into trouble. If I told you what I turned down and the person that did play this part and won all sorts of things for it, it would make me look like a complete schmuck. And it also, you feel bad for the other person. And it's as though you're trying to take away from them or whatever, or the other way around. So I could tell you, but I'll meet you afterwards.
I don't think I've had one. I think I've been trying to think of some. No, I don't think so. I think usually, even if I think, oh, that's so good, I've thought, I may not be right for me. I may not be able to do what somebody else could do. And then usually when I see it, I think, that's the right person for it. The right person got it.
Well, you know yourself.
Thank you. Over here.
Yeah, so I can definitely relate to the woman that made the comment before. When I was in the hospital, I would love to watch a lot of your movies. It would make me laugh so hard. My dad even used to have a poster of the spy movie because he wanted me to see that so bad. But I was just wondering, which movie would you say was your favorite to film, with the most fun?
I mean, I know it's not, I don't mean to do a cop-out, but I love them all. It really is by the time you're done with them, they become a little part of you. And each one, it's like summer camp. It's like each time you're you stayed with these people, you lived together, you laughed, you had the dumbest inside jokes, you improvised and did so many things wrong that by the end, there's all so near and dear for different reasons. Spy was so fun because it was so ridiculous and you just end up laughing. And Bridesmaids I was with all my closest friends that we thought nobody would go see that movie. We're like, we're making a movie, who's gonna see it? And so they each kind of stay near and dear to you and you keep them with you.
Makes sense. You seem really close with everybody in the movies. I remember falling out of the bed when I first saw The Heat. But thank you so much. And oh my God, I just had a conversation with Melissa McCarthy.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh. I feel the same way about you.
Thank you, guys. I see some more people lining up. Thank you for getting bold. Come out here. Yes, go ahead.
So, how do you manage to have so much confidence? And do you have any advice to someone who's trying to build her confidence?
How do you have so much confidence?
I'm not being disingenuous. It's a daily thing that I wake up and I think, because my father, who's died 37 years ago, the voice doesn't go away that sits on your shoulder, go, you're not good enough, you're never going to make it, you're a piece of whatever. And so when you don't feel confident, which is a lot of the time, or you get rejected for a job that you really want, that's trying to steer through that and just go, I will take a deep breath and I will make the best of what I can. I think that's ongoing in your life if you have that issue. So I absolutely identify and I recognize what you're talking about. Melissa doesn't have that problem.
No, I think I don't know anyone who doesn't wrestle with it. I think it's finding how you wrestle best with it. I think I thank God found a place called the Groundlings Theater in Los Angeles where 90,000 times you bombed and made such a complete ass of yourself in front of a whole crowd of people that were absolutely like, we don't like you. And you do it again and again, and then every time you fall on your face and you get back up and you realize, I got up. And then the bombs become some of your favorite memories. And when we all get together, that we were all at the Groundlings, we only talk about, our most famous stories are the bombs. Remember how much they hated you? And when you realize that you're always gonna get back up. Who cares? Fall on your face 20 times. Boy, that one time that you don't fall down, that's the feeling. And who cares about the 20 other times? It's you begin to enjoy the nerves and the falling down as much as the accomplishments, for sure. You really do. You just have to jump.
Okay, thanks.
Good advice. Thank you.
Say that last year in theater, I had to write down a actress that most inspired me, and I wrote down you. My question is, why is it important to tell stories like Lee's, and what do you think the effect that it'll have on society is, and why is it so important in today's society?
What was the last part?
Why is it so important in today's society to tell stories like Lee's?
I think, at least for myself, when I read it and when I watch movies like this, and what Lee Israel means to me is it tethers us. It tethers us as humans and people, that we all feel insecure and that we all feel like we're being dismissed. And do you fit in? And why can't I do what I want to do? And when you watch and see that everybody feels that, everybody has a struggle. It might be worse than yours or less at moments, but it's a very common bond, and it makes you have a little bit more compassion, makes you notice people that maybe otherwise could be invisible, and you realize that everybody deserves to be looked at and seen. And I think that's the importance of stories like this, at least to me.
Thank you.
Richard, do you want to add anything about playing a character like Jack?
No.
No? Okay.
But thank you for the offer.
Yes.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
I thought Mike and Molly was so good. I think that 3-camera shows get so much flack right now, and I just thought it was so smart and funny and wonderful.
Oh, thanks.
And this is a really non-specific question, but one of my favorite part about the show was you and Katie Mixon and Susie Kurtz all together. I just thought you guys were one more funnier than the next and the next and the next. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about working with these two other incredibly funny, brilliant women all together. I just thought
It was a dreamy situation. I went to work for 6 years with a kick in my step, because you never know what's gonna come out of Katie's mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, the first day I met her, I was like, is she gonna drop that? Like, is this for real? And then you realize, oh my God, it's real. Like, hi, honey pie. Like, and then just the craziest story. And no one on earth tells funnier stories than Swoozie. And it was this, we were kind of an immediate family. And I think when you have that closeness, and again, everybody's just willing to do whatever, and we still talk all the time. That whole group we've stayed very, very close. And it's just, so you get Swoozie, who's, done everything on earth and is so quick to, make fun of herself, and so is Katie, and it's just everybody can let their guards down. It was really, it was a wonderful 6 years. I miss it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi there.
Thank you both for coming. It's been a lovely conversation, and you two seem like the kind of folks that I think almost anybody in here would love to talk to in any circumstance. So I have a kind of an either-or for both of you, and that is, who would you think of that has had a particular influence on you, that either gave you a lodestar or that gave you, and this is, I guess, the or part of it, a particular piece of advice that you go to, either consciously or unconsciously, regularly?
He always gives me the eyes. Just like that. At a certain point in New York, when I was doing many, many plays, and I thought, oh, my parents, I have to call them for money, and even though I'm doing 3 jobs, I can never quite clear it, and if one thing breaks, if I have to pay for anything, I'm doomed. And I think I called them at one point saying, I think I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna stop this, and I'll get something real. And I started doing other jobs, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll get into. I was trying this and that and everything else. And I remember my mom calling me when I thought I was finally doing, maybe something more responsible in their opinion. And she said, when are you gonna get back to what you do? And I didn't even know what she was referring to, because we'd never really talked about acting as like a real viable thing, probably because I had not made 13 cents doing it, and it had been many, many years. And she said, well, you get back to what you do. You're not doing it. And I was like, well, I know, but I can't support myself. She said, it's nothing to do with it. Get back to what you do. And it was one of the more it was very different from my mom to say something like that. Always very sweet, very supportive. But it was a real stand your ground and get back in there kind of thing. And I think it really changed my trajectory. It meant a lot to me, and that comes when I'm not feeling so secure, or I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I do think of my mother's voice saying, stand your ground.
Thank you.
Was she a funny person?
She's a very funny person. She's a hoot. She doesn't try to be, but my mom and dad are very, very funny. They're on the train from Illinois, coming out here as we speak. They don't fly. Or my mom doesn't fly, so they're on a train out here, and they're just both as funny as can be and lovely.
And Richard, was there somebody who shaped you in some way?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I was very influenced by Donald Sutherland, because I read that he had a very long face. And I was looking for a role model. So when people kept saying to me, how can you be an actor? And I said, well, Donald Sutherland's an actor. And they said, yeah, but he's a movie star. And I said, yeah, but he's got a long face. So when I finally met him, my wife is an accent coach, and she was teaching him to do an accent. And we were in a 4-seasons hotel in LA, and I met him in this room, and I said, Mr. Sutherland, he said, call me Donald. I said, at what point, I was 35 at this point, I said, when do you stop auditioning? When does you ever get to the point where it's like, we're going to see 20 other people first before you? And he said, you're thinking about it in the wrong way. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you have got to go in with the mindset that they'd be lucky to have you, and you've got to decide whether you want to work with them. And it's worked ever since. And I just, I realized, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You never stop auditioning. You know, to answer the young lady's question earlier, you never stop auditioning. There's always somebody that, you know, you've got to prove yourself to. And I think once you accept that no is sort of invisibly tattooed across most people's heads, saying, we don't want you, we want somebody shorter, older, the younger version, you know, just less blonde, less whatever. Then once you accept that, then you have to go for it like a pit pony, as I do.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello there.
The rest of you, but if anybody would have told me that I would be in the same room with Suki St. James and with nail people, come on. I mean, like, it blows the mind. But what I wanted to ask both of you was, what was the most recent time that you were ever in a room with somebody where you were like, I'm meeting this person? Does that happen?
Oh, God, yes.
So what was your, I know probably a lot, but like the most recent thing that you can remember?
I was brought up middle class. You have to go first because you're the lady.
Well, thanks for noticing. It's sometimes questioned. Oh, God. I know that when I met Gloria Steinem, I got super weird. And I was coming to hear her speak, and someone, especially for her, but I'm a nerd that always gets someplace early. And I usually just sit in my car because I don't want to be late. Something about the farm, it was a long drive into town, whatever. It stays with you. And I was there early and someone saw me and said, oh, come upstairs and come meet Gloria. And I was like, it was just like weird, non-gland parts of my body sweating. And I came up and I thought, oh, it's going to be some huge room and I'll just keep to myself somewhere. I will not go up and talk to her. And we walked into someone's very tiny office that was maybe the size of this carpet. And she was in there and being very lovely, and there was only about 4 people, and I chose to go stand in a corner pretending to read something, but I was so nervous that I was just staring at a blank white wall. And the person that had brought me up to this office came over and said, what the hell are you doing? You look crazy. And I was like, I don't want to seem weird in front of Gloria. So my play to not be weird was literally like, that's interesting. I was like pretending to read, and there, by the way, there was stuff all over the walls. I could have picked a spot where it looked like I was looking at something, but I was too nervous, so I stood and stared at a blank wall and like mimed that I was like, I'll have to remember that point. And then I did finally meet her, and I was coming out of my skin, and she couldn't have been lovelier and funnier and just was everything I'd ever dreamed for and more, but I made a real strange mess of it before I met her.
I know you. I just have to tell you who this person is. This is Heidi, and Heidi the first film that I was ever in 100 years ago, that nobody in this room will ever have seen other than you. You have collected the facsimile props from this movie on a scale that is off the charts, and it's an obsession that I have never come across, other than what goes on in my head with the person that I'm obsessed with. So I completely understand and identify with you on this. But to answer your question, there were 2 people in my life. I was at school with Nelson Mandela's daughters because they were sent to Swaziland because he was in prison in South Africa, which is the neighboring country in which I grew up. So when I finally met him, I couldn't talk because I was so overwhelmed, because the prospect of having gone to school with his daughters in the 1970s and done plays with them, and they used to go once a year to visit their father on Robben Island, was such a head-fucking thing to deal with, as not even related to him, just to imagine what that was like, of your parents, your father not being available. So the idea that he would ever get out of prison and then become the president was just astonishing. So when I met him, I was overwhelmed. But the other one is an earlier one, and I had been obsessed with Barbara Streisand. This poor lady's had to hear about this forever, and my poor wife, you can imagine. So I'd seen What's Up, Doc when I was 15, when she was in that tight tank top, right? Hormonal storm, and it hasn't stopped. My poor wife said, she's now 76. If Bad said come, would you still? I'd go, yeah, I'd be there. So I finally meet her at a party. I'm doing The Player with Robert Altman in Los Angeles in 1990. And I'm in a room, and Winona Ryder, who's 19, is telling me how much she loves the film that you love that I was in called Withnail and I. She's giving me all the dialogue and all this. Oh, thank you. 4 people saw it. And she's giving me all this stuff. She's fanning me. And I realized that the nature of being a fan is that a cul-de-sac, because, of course, I didn't know anything about Winona other than I'd seen her in some movies, but I didn't feel that way she felt about this movie that I was in. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw Babs. I was a goner. And I said, ha, 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 ha. How do I meet Barbra Streisand? And Patricia Arquette said, oh, she used to go out with my boyfriend. I'll get her to come over. So she came over, and I spoke to her for 22 minutes in 1990, in July. And the first thing she said to me, she said, you know, she's slightly cross-eyed. She said, are you stoned? And I said, no, I'm just like overwhelmed to meet you. And she calmed me down, and I said, did you ever get the letter I sent to you? She obviously realized she was dealing with a complete basket case. She said, what did you send? And I said, dear Barbara, I've just seen you in. I've heard that you're having trouble with Ryan O'Neill. Please come to Swaziland. We have a lovely house and a pool. Nobody will know who you are. Come and stay. She said, I never got it. So, you know. But this obsession that you have that, you know, I know from psychoanalysis, you're supposed to pass through that phase by the time you're 19. I'm a 62-year-old man still obsessed with Barbara. It's insane. And I understand, and I know that you're not 62 years old. Okay, well, hallelujah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have time for one more question.
You are an amazing comedic improviser, and
thanks.
Really amazing. Back in the day of DVDs, I would watch comedy DVDs, and I'd listen to the director track, and I'd find out that my favorite scenes, the ones I found the funniest, were in fact improvised. And as a comedy screenwriter, I'll be writing, and people will tell me they laugh out loud when they read the scripts, but I know when I'm writing a scene, I imagine an actor like you could just take it and run and push it into the end field. So I'm wondering, for you, how do you feel about the comedy that's written on the page versus what's improvised?
Well, I think you can only improvise if the page is good. You need the roadmap. You need the story and the roadmap and the characters and everything that we desperately need from the screenwriter. You know, when someone says, oh, I improvised it all and implied that they made it up and wrote the story, I always think, that's like saying somebody bought a car and, you know, you put a bow this big on it. It's like you didn't buy the car. You embellished it. It only makes sense. You can't suddenly start talking about like the bees, you know, if you're in a scene about an office. So it only works when the writing is so good that you know your character, you know what else your character would say, and then it's little ads here and there. It's lots of little ads. Sometimes there's a big run, but it's still within the character, within the story. You know, I've learned the hard way. You can go off and say all these funny things. If it's off story, it's never going to see the inside of a theater. So you do have to stick to the guideline of what the screenwriter gave you. And it really, like, you can't jump and improvise if the base isn't there.
So what Melissa's saying is don't give up. I think.
I'll take it. Thank
Saying
you.
we need you. We need you desperately.
We need you.
Teamwork.
Yes,
Yay.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. You have been an amazing audience. Thank these folks both for being with us here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.